My research is very much centered in this area and has looked at the variety of ways that workplace pressure does impact mental health. And actually, just to build off of what you were saying, there's a number of initiatives that have taken place in workplaces, but I feel as though, and my research suggests, they've been isolated to the workplace and don't consider really how those pressures spill over and invade other domains of our life, including our family life, right, our non-paid life. And work-family conflict is now actually being considered or dubbed the modern day mental health risk for workers. 7 out of 10 individuals in the studies that I've worked on report at least some level of work-family conflict. And 2, the consequences seem to be resulting in psychological distress, anxiety, definitely sleep problems, and perceptions of time pressures, which we probably can all relate to. The unfortunate part is this is becoming more and more an issue for individuals and leading to then workplace consequences such as absenteeism or presenteeism, as well as turnover intentions and just decreased productivity overall. And so the consequences of this quote unquote modern day stressor really does need to be more, I think, researched in the future, but not only the consequences, the facilitators, and those really are the high work demands and the high work pressures that we face every day, and better how to match what we experience in our family life to then what we're experiencing in our work life and try to achieve some balance. And so a lot of that can relate to not only what's available to our workplace or in our workplace and our family life, but what my research specifically looks at, how the communities in which we engage daily, whether it be our workplace communities or residential communities, can actually help support us. And if you think of some of the social supports or the physical resources that are available in those communities, right, if we think of practical and quality childcare, as well as then opportunities to allow us to seek out those resources for the mental health consequences that follow from this modern day mental health risk.
So the ideal worker, this is a label that we have for the kind of person we typically want to hire or the kind of person who we typically want to promote. It's a person who has no life outside of work and who is always available for their work, always on for their work, can come in on the weekends, has no other responsibilities that will interfere with their availability for work. This image is particularly sort of revered in the professions. So in consulting, in law, medicine, like our ideal is this person who's always on. And we tend, so my research is about gender inequality. One of sort of the dominant explanations that we have for gender inequality is that men are very happy to be ideal workers. Women are not happy to be ideal workers. And so that's why you see this split. That's why you have equal numbers of men and women going into medicine, in law, consulting, but the women leave after 5 years. It's because women don't really want to be ideal workers. Men are very happy to be ideal workers. So my research shows that this is not at all the case. I conducted a big field study of a major consulting firm, and I found that men and women complained about the work hours at the exact same rate. Men and women alike expressed anxiety, worry about their children, worry about the fact that they were not having children because they were working all the time, health problems. Both men and women, the numbers were exactly the same. Both men and women were also leaving the consulting firm at the exact same rate because of the work pressures. But what happened inside the firm was that they had different ways of coping. So women were offered very well-meaning flexible work programs. They would go into these flexible work programs, they would get mommy tracked, they would not move up the ranks. Men, however, did not have access to these flexible work programs. If they asked for them, they were shamed. They were told they were like not man enough. A leader there actually told me, those aren't the kind of guys we want, the kind of guys who would take paternity leave, for example. So they did not have access to these programs, but they did have really great networks because most of the people in the profession were men, and so they had a lot of buddies, and they covered for each other and found ways to work less and sort of pass.
Some of the work we're looking at is like the kinds of best practices around managers being responsible not only for operational side performance, but also on the human resource side performance as well. So I think of joint management systems where everybody in the organization is responsible for being accommodating to people's needs. So we all play a role in that kind of process. Historically, maybe organizations took the perspective that either an outside service provider took care of that, whether it's a workers' compensation board or a private insurer that provided as a part of the benefits package, or maybe sometimes somebody within the organization, HR or the disability manager. But more and more we're seeing that organizations where they jointly manage operations and health of their workforce, where everybody takes responsibility, particularly at the supervisory and management level, those organizations outperform the ones that focus exclusively on operational type performance. They do better on the performance side in terms of operational performance, and also on the health and well-being of their workforce as well. So we're doing actually an intervention at McMaster. It's a caregiver-friendly workplace policies interventions, where we're evaluating the merits both the organization and the individual of developing policies that support people's flexibility needs when they have family demands that are quite stressful for them, and they need to attend to their caregiving role, for their parents, elder parents.
My employees can set their own boundaries. I will respect my employees' boundaries. But the problem is, when you think about employees, work is insecure, they're more junior than their managers, they want to get ahead. It's very hard to set boundaries yourself and not respond to, for example, urgent requests over the weekend, or tell your manager, no, I just don't take meetings after 5 o'clock. It's a lot to ask the employee to set their own boundaries. So I really see the role, the employer and the manager is really key in setting boundaries around long work hours. Some things that I've written about that people can do is make a commitment not to send emails on the weekend, even if as a manager you're sending the emails just to sort of like manage your own brain and take notes. You can write the email and in a draft form and send it first thing Monday morning. Because the problem is you may not expect your employee to respond, right? You might just be like, oh, I'm thinking about this right now. I'm putting in the extra hours, so I'm gonna write the email so it's done so that I can move on in my brain. The problem is the employee who receives the email, like on a Saturday at 3 o'clock, if this person is worried about keeping their job, if they're worried about getting ahead, they're going to feel nervous about actually setting a boundary, and so then they'll work, and probably they'll send you an email, and then you'll respond to their email, and you've just set up this like horrible destructive spiral when you could have waited till Monday when everyone is a little bit more well rested. So that's one piece of advice: no email on the weekends, unless it's really, really actually extreme.
The experiences of work-family conflict and really the mental health consequences amongst immigrants tend to be lessened in the Toronto area when individuals live around similar others. And so these ethnic enclaves that a number of people have gravitated to in the Toronto area does seem to be a supportive resource for individuals that have first moved to this country or experiencing those work-family conflicts, and do have then at least some social network or support system to help them get through. Now that I found in the Toronto area, but not necessarily in research looking Canada-wide. So in that case, I would say maybe there's something unique going on, of which I can't speak to necessarily.
I believe, my understanding is these large organizations have these sort of robust mental health and wellness programs, but they also set themselves up so that their employees can basically live there all day. And so if you have, so I think like many of them have like cafeterias and games rooms where they have food available at all times. So I question whether the employer really wants them to take time away from work, or they want to say this is available to you, but we're also going to set things up so that you can be here all the time. And to me, it's an example of this problem of saying, well, it's up, I trust my employee to set their own boundaries. Like, your employee is not, it's very hard to say that you are not going to stay at Google until 10 o'clock if everyone else on your team is staying at Google until 10 o'clock. If the whole social environment is about staying there, the employee themselves cannot make the decision. So,
to ensure we adopt new norms as a society of work-life balance and a sense of community, that our lives aren't centered around just work, I think, and that's a cultural shift I think we have to kind of engender as individuals, as communities, as a society.